to prove it, I'm ready to do it, I can't be afraid now. Put me on the stage now, I'm ready to rage now. I feel like an animal stuck in a cage and I'm ready to break out. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. This time, like the last time, you better get ready to race to the top. I'm ready to do this, show you what the truth is. I step on the field, it's time to get real, I'm feeling so ruthless. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Yeah. So what are you afraid of? Those feelings are made of. Get in the game, your moment of fame, show them what you made of. It's time that we stand up, it's time that we man up. For anyone asking who is the best, we putting our hands up. My time, nothing can keep me from reaching the top. This time, like the last time, I'm moving so fast, I'm ready to ride. I'm ready to throw down, it's time for the showdown. I'm ready to rise, don't be surprised, I'll take on the world now. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. My town, my crown, we know what it takes to be reaching the top. We're reaching the top, we're reaching the top. We know what it takes to be reaching the top. Lower the lights down, hand over my crown, hand over my heart. I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop. Turning the track up, I'm never going back down. Hand over my heart, I do this for my town, I do this for my crowd. So turn me up real loud. My time, none of you people can tell me to stop.
This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing. The Pagoda at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It wouldn't be May without the greatest spectacle in all of sim racing. Hello and welcome to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and welcome to the 10th annual iRacing Indy 500 pre-race show here with myself, Will Vincent, and that guy over there, Mr. Randy Cheneth. It is about 1 hour and 30 minutes before the green flag drops for the 10th annual iRacing Indy 500. It is quite unquestionably one of the biggest events of the iRacing calendar, and as ever, hundreds of drivers have attempted to do what is one of the most complicated feats in all of iRacing, and that is set a 4-lap average to make the top 33 and guarantee themselves a slot in our broadcasted race a little bit later on. But let's not forget, this is not only about the top 33 drivers, but thousands of iRacers across this weekend who are looking to have their own little shape of history. And who knows, there might be some milk drunk along the way as well. We're here live on RaceSpot TV, on Facebook Live, on the iRacing Esports Network, as we get ourselves ready then on this pre-race show. We'll be with you for the next 57 minutes. And well, Randy, there's not much that I can say about this place I haven't said over my last 7 years commentating this amazing event.
Yeah, we're going to have to start repeating ourselves, but what else are you supposed to do at such an enigma of motorsports such as the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and with this event that we have every single year? It's going to be a fantastic event, and it's really the highlight, I think, for you and me for our sim racing years as far as commentary goes. It's always the most fun, I think, event to bring to you guys, the viewers, every single year. It always delivers.
Yeah, many people will call it their version of the Super Bowl, the World Series, WrestleMania, whatever. It is a culmination for so many drivers of a hard year's worth of work. And of course, Randy, it's worth noting that in 2019, so the first time since 2011 that the IndyCar community have had their own kind of like year-long series as well. Following in the steps of the NASCAR iRacing series, well, there's now the IndyCar iRacing series that's been taking place over the course of the last couple of weeks, started at the back end of April. And it really does show the momentum that's not only going on in IndyCar overall at the moment, of course, getting NTT as their new title sponsor over the course of the last few months, but also the kind of resurgence, I think, of the IndyCar community after what had been a little bit of a tough couple of years.
Yeah, and it's great to see for Indy finally picking up this sort of momentum in IndyCar racing in general, that things are perking up. I know that there's been a lot of a lot of criticisms to a lot of things in the real world, but a lot of people are excited about the sort of coverage that NBC has brought to the table and the way they're representing the sport, and it seems to be going very, very well. There's a lot of resurgence in the sport, and it's going to be interesting to see how things go moving forward. Talks of a race happening in Brazil, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that given some of the qualifying results today. Potentially happening at Interlagos, with maybe that track getting taken off the F1 calendar and the F1 circuit. But IndyCar is looking very much up right now, and there's no better time for IndyCar to be up than the month of May.
Yeah, many people over the course of the next week will be heading themselves to Speedway, Indiana. Some people just drive along the I-465, the I-70. Some people will literally, and I've done it myself, book seats on the right side of the plane to make sure you get your first glimpse of the Speedway as you come into land at Indianapolis Airport. One thing I will say, though, you're completely right. We're going to have in Indianapolis 500 next week, all 50 states will have someone at the Speedway, and it has an international audience. But you talk about the internationalness, shall we say, of the iRacing Indy 500. Over the years, we've seen competitors from every continent on the globe compete in this race.
Yeah, just about. I don't know if we've had any from Antarctica, but
okay.
Yeah, just well, I'll say 6 out of 7 ain't bad.
Yeah, as we're just having a look there, of course, that is the pagoda that sits on top. That's actually the third pagoda built at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, along with the pit complex as well. It's worth noting, we talk about pole positions, former pole positions. We're going to put the graphic up for you right now. And, well, over the years, qualifying and getting that 4-lap average done has been so difficult. Young-O, 2011, 2012, 2013, 3 pole positions on the bounce. Brandon Traino this year, Randy, was looking to try and get his third. He's not done so. He's had 2 pole positions in 2016 and 2017, with John Golinski, John Paquin, Rick Music, and Mitch McCracken each having 1 pole position to their name. They are joined, though, in 2019 by a new man. That is, of course, Michele Constantini.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's the pole position is obviously always so coveted here, but there's been a handful of names that tend to dominate it over and over. And, you know, you talk about Young-O, 2011, 12, and 13. We've not seen that sort of domination in a long, long time since Young has stopped racing. And, man, nearly 6 years ago now. It's amazing how long it's been since we've seen Young-O on the service. But that qualifying is, of course, always just that little bit to just sort of get everyone started at the top of the week and get everyone going. It's not Michele Constantini who's on pole this year, Will. I'm not sure where you pulled that. It's Marco Aurelio Brazil who has pulled pole position this year.
No, Andy, I mean, bouncing across so many series, I do apologise. I'm allowed one mistake. At least I've got it out of the way in terms of the pre-show. But the thing is, as well, a lot of these drivers, and this is one thing I do want to talk about, because you and I have both run in the iRacing Indy 500 in years gone by, so much effort is put into getting that 4-lap run done that actually a lot of these drivers have probably only had a couple of hours to perfect their race situation. And that makes quite often for a very interesting first 25% of the race, because you really see the teams that were having to really push in qualifying not able to dedicate the amount of time they wanted into getting a car that will work once we enter that 200-lap event.
You're absolutely right, and it's the bigger teams that sometimes will often have the advantage here at the Speedway, just because they can sort of split their teams up a little bit. Say, okay, this group of people is going to work on qualifying. The group of people is going to work on the race setup and working in dirty air and all the things like that, and then somewhere near probably about the early point to midpoint of this week, they will somewhat converge, maybe share their data, maybe some things they found in each setup can get put on the car either way. Maybe something from the race car can get put on the quali setup or vice versa, and then they'll combine their data. Everyone will get their chance to run both sets, and then they'll get out there and get racing. Smaller teams are not going to have that privilege, and it is very, very difficult to building 4-lap sets to run here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and to get yourself quick. I know there's been all sorts of people chasing that Team Brazil group, trying to figure out how they've gotten so much speed out of their cars, which is something we'll, of course, be talking about over the course of the motor race and some more of this pre-race show. It is a big, big ask getting the cars in order to work here, especially these new IR18s, Will. We've seen so much drama and so many teams struggling to get those new cars up to speed, and we're seeing the same in the real world, and we're seeing that as well in the sim, with teams really struggling trying to find pace with the less aero that they have to work with in these new Delaras.
Yeah, and you talk about the qualifying itself and the fact that people's having to work together, as we so often see here at Indianapolis. And I think that we saw the last couple of years, it was really Broken Arrow who had taken that speedway and made it their own in terms of both qualifying and to a large extent the race. But one thing we do often see here, Andy, is unlikely alliances between teams. We've seen before, for example, the likes of Ray Alfala. He's worked with Broken Arrow in the past. We see a couple of NASCAR drivers come in, a couple of people from the roadside. I remember a couple of years ago, there were the rumours that Gregor Hooter and Martin Kroenke would take on the speedway, but they never actually materialised in doing so. But you do see not only the wider iRacing community get involved in this event, you start seeing partnerships between the likes of the eNASCAR Peak Entry Series as well as drivers from the other World Championship Series think, okay, is it worth having a go?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, and I love the internationalness of this race. It's something that I've always talked about and I really always enjoyed. And, you know, just going down the list of names, I mean, the one name that pops out as someone who's a crossover for this year, put himself 22nd on the grid, is Christian Challinor, who drives the eNASCAR Peak Antifreeze iRacing series, of course. We saw him in the championship Final Four just a couple of years back. Hasn't been able to put a championship run together last season and isn't having an amazing run this season, but Christian should be a fun shout to watch. You know, just because he's really, I think, the only world championship driver we have on the grid, save for maybe the likes of Alex Simpson, who I think may be sitting out from the Imola VRS race to run this.
Yeah, and we have seen Alex Simpson be fast here at the Speedway before. And just to let you know, by the way, in terms of the VRS GT Racing World Championship, which is actually right now live on the iRacing Esports Network, they're about 2 hours into their 3-hour event as we speak. Well, the way it works is you've got a team of 3 or 4 drivers over there, so not every driver has to run every single race, which gave the opportunity to Alex Simpson to focus along with teammates, the expanded Apex Racing team. They have that partnership normally with Broken Arrow when they come into the month of May to run in this event. Of course, it wouldn't be Indy without talking about previous winners here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So we're going to put the Roll of Honor up on your screen right now. Of course, it all started in 2010 with Justin Dalston winning the first ever iRacing Indianapolis 500. A couple of things that's worth noting here, by the way. Back when it started, you see, 2011 was the first of the Tim Doyle Young O battles. Tim Doyle won in 2011, Young O won in 2012. The first 3 of those races, Randy, there was only one. There's one race, which is at the standard time slot we had now. Over time, because the event's gotten so big, they've made it into 4 separate splits. In terms of our Road of Honors, you see Brady Kostecki 2013. We are looking at the person who won the broadcasted race on the traditional Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, and it's so many different names, and of course that's the big talking point when you look down the winners list and you see the winners run through. It's been a different person every single year for 10 years. Never seen someone win this broadcasted race twice. But when you look at the runner-ups of those races, which we'll have the graphic for you guys shortly, which has the people that finished second in the margin of victory, because that's the other thing to talk about. Only in 10 years, only once has that margin of victory been over a second, and only once again has it been over a 1/10 of a second. So many times there's been a handful of names that have been close to putting themselves twice on the winners list, if not more. But this place is difficult to win at. And it is going to put on a good. I'm just so excited. It's May, Will. It's May.
It is. It's finally the month of May. It's finally the biggest race of the iRacing year. And yeah, we are going to put that graphic up in a moment, showing you who the margin of victories. I always want to give a shout out, by the way, to Dennis Greaves, Jonathan Goat, Nigel Marnese, Scott McLaughlin, Ryan Norton, Brandon Trano, Christian Steele, Brandon Lichtenberg, Stefan Remedy, Christopher Demerit, Joseph Burton Harris, and again to Tim Dodd. They have all won the quote-unquote other races that have taken place either on a Friday night, as it was in 2013-14, or Friday night, Saturday evening into Sunday morning US time, or on Sunday afternoon. So a lot of people have won the top split event over the years. There have been a couple of people who have won more than one top split race, but no driver has ever won this race twice. Tim Holgate and Tim Doyle have come agonizingly close over the years, Randy. I mean, I remember when I first joined iRacing back in 2011, I saw the battle between Tim Doyle, Young O winning in 2012, Tim Doyle winning in 2011. Both times it went absolutely to the wires. We put up the box scores on your screen, and you can just see the margins of victory. Last year was the first time that we ever really saw a quote-unquote green-white checkered, shall we say, a one-lap dash to the end, which makes that gap smaller than others would argue it would be. But, you know, Tim Doyle, Young O, 2011, 2012, margin of victory, the average margin of victory was 3/100ths of a second.
And we talk about how close some of these drivers have been to winning this race twice. I mean, you look at through those first 3 years, Tim Doyle came something in aggregate, something like a tenth and a half in aggregate of winning this race 3 times in a row in the opening years. So, I mean, that's really the big thing to talk about. We've seen that group really struggle over the number of years, Will, but we've seen over the recent years, with the likes of Snake Pit. But it's really been the changing of the guard we've seen even in the iRacing IndyCar community, and a lot of new names that we haven't seen before starting to rise its way to the top, and a lot of the older names starting to cycle out, maybe not racing as much, maybe getting older. But yeah, the margin of victory here and how close these races always are every single year is what makes this such a special event.
Yeah, we are going to show you, by the way, highlights of the races from 2015, 16, 17, and 18 a little bit later on our pre-race show here on Facebook Live. Thank you to everyone who's joining us on Facebook Live. We have got a competition here today as well. Thank you to our presenting sponsor of this race, Virtual Racing School. We've got ourselves a free 1-month membership for those of you in the United States and America and loads of you in Europe as well. We've got ourselves a little game going on Facebook. We've got 10 phrases which normally come up in conversation in the iRacing Indy 500. All you've got to do when we go to our live broadcast later on is to listen out for them, note down the timestamp, send them in to us, and you could win a prize thanks to our sponsor, Virtual Racing School, which is pretty neat, Randy.
Yeah, it's always great to see VRS and the sponsors we've had in the past get involved, especially with this race. Well, get involved with the special events outside of even just the World Championships, but as well, couple of passes to some VRS schooling. I think that's going to be more than adequate. I will say, Will, I'm disappointed in VRS. They have one of their now sponsored drivers, Sage Karam. They couldn't beat him over the head with a bat and have him run the iRacing race. He thinks the real Indy 500 is more important than ours. What is that kid thinking?
Well, yeah, you did tell me the story of one year he actually took his rig to the racetrack.
That's this year. He has
got his rig.
He has his rig at the racetrack, but of course, let's say time doesn't work itself out. Was this race happening at the same time as qualifying? And I have a feeling he's going to be working really hard to get that Wix car into the top 33 of the real race for next week. But yeah, I was really hoping time would work itself out and maybe Sage would be able to run, but it just didn't seem to end up panning itself out.
Yeah, you can, of course, catch time trials for the 2019 Indianapolis 500. That'll be live on NBC Sports Gold, as well as a little bit later on the NBC Sport Network, as well as the Advanced Auto Parts IndyCar Radio. The race, of course, it will start at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, the greatest day of motorsport in the world. Champagne for breakfast, milk for lunch, and a nice barbecue for dinner. Coverage of that 11 Eastern, that'll be on NBC. Live, of course, in the UK on Sky Sports, and around the world you can catch it on your local stations as well. So, whereabouts are we? We are about an hour, 10 minutes
Speedway,
now.
Indiana.
Yeah, we're at Speedway, Indiana. We're about an hour and 15 minutes from the drop of the green flag here, Randy, and we talk about those last-minute preparations. Again, you and I have both been in this race, and I think the first thing is the am I in the top split trepidations? The first thing, of course. If you're in the top 33, you're guaranteed entry into this race. It's those bubble drivers, because, of course, not all of the top 33 will enter into this race. We'll see a lot of them, but over the years, I remember I was 36th and I made it into the field as a 32nd driver back in 2012. But that first thing is you're worrying and hoping you do make the broadcasted race.
That is the big thing, and normally I would generally say you need to be about 37, 38 quick in order to really, I think, be considered safe. Because, of course, like you said, you have a handful of no-shows. You're going to see a couple of those drivers who technically qualified in the top 33 due to whatever they got going on. If it's like Christian Steele, I don't know if Steele's actually going to be racing this one. He's typically had stuff going on. He had prom, I think, a couple of years back that he skipped the race for. So for any of these drivers, if they end up not racing, you will find yourself getting in towards that top split. And it's some interesting names that you have outside of the top 33. Zach Campbell, 34th. Alex Simpson, 35th. Adam Blocker, Chad Simpson, Michael Chin. We haven't seen Michael Chin in a long, long time. He put that car 38th quick. You have John Goke, 39th, and Johan Hart, who's another one of the world championship level drivers. He puts himself 40th. Liam Quinn, 41st. Riley Thompson, 42nd. Brendan Lichtenberg, if memory serves me right, one-time pole sitter this race, he's 44th. So a lot of fast names outside of that top 33 who are going to be trying to work their way in. The Kingsburys aren't in the top 33, but they won't be getting into the race. They're in the 60s in terms of qualifying. But I just go that deep down the order to show how hard some of these teams have come out swinging in order to take so many of these positions inside of the top 33, because there's a lot of new drivers taking part this year that we've never seen in the top split.
Yeah, and we've somehow managed to make it 20 minutes in without really going into detail about this. The Brazilian invasion of the iRacing Indy 500, of course. They've got a rich pedigree here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Elio Castro-Neves, a three-time winner of this event, as well as Tony Kanaan winning this event as well. The first time actually I ever went to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Tony Kanaan was the winner back then. But your top 4 drivers, and you've got yourselves a total of 7 of the top 10, all representing Club Brazil. Marco Aurelio Brazil getting himself pole position by an average of 11 thousandths of a second over the 4-lap run over Silvio Roberto Sanchez, Wilson Neto in 3rd, Alan Moria in 4th place. I mean, if this is the World Cup of iRacing, Randy, I think there'd be a shoe-in right now. But, I mean, I haven't seen one club come together for a big event like this in such a long time. We often see the likes of, for example, Glacier Racing, the all-Finnish team, them getting together to do some of these big races. But I don't think in the history of the iRacing Indy 500 we've seen a nation-based club have so much dominance in qualifying.
No, we haven't. And you talked about 7 of the top 10. For total, it's 14 of the top 33 drivers reign from Brazil. So it really is domination up from the South America that we've seen. And it just shows the sort of work that group has been put in. I don't think it's a stretch to say that group was led by Marco Brazil. Of course, how more iconic would it be than for the person who's leading Club Brazil to be named Brazil? But, Marco's, of course, been a very fast driver for a long time. And it's good to see really a new effort kind of come in, Will, because we haven't seen a big new team in a long time come out like this in the IndyCar sort of streets. We've seen, you might see a couple drivers here and there that come in and are relevant, but we've never seen such a huge group of names. And I know that there were several sort of teams and several community discords wondering where in the world half of these people had come from, because they had never really seen their names before.
Well, we know where in the world they came from. They came from Brazil. But, I mean, it's been a fantastic effort by them, I will have to say. What we're going to do at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, is we're just having a look at a couple of drivers on track right now. In a few moments' time, we are going to run through, as you say, the highlights of the races from 2015 through to 2018. You were with me on the call. I think it was in the 2016 race, Randy?
I did last year, and I think I did 17 as well.
Yes, so you've been here a while, not as long as me, though. Of course, it's been, unfortunately, we don't have the quote-unquote old guys of Paul and Aaron, who, of course, has commentated this race for so many years, almost became synonymous with this racetrack, of course, not only for this event, but for things like the Indy Elite Series, ISOWC over the years as well. So it's a shame. Aaron is currently doing what he normally does, Randy, flagging down at Indianapolis, and unfortunately, Paul just can't be with us today. He's on vacation.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate having such busy people. Of course, Aaron is a USAC flagman, so he's starting the quarter midgets. He's actually gotten to wave the green flag here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway a number of times, but I think the highlight of that was he got the opportunity to let a practice session go green with the Indy cars, and of course had some cars buzz past him at a couple 100 miles an hour, which is a little quicker than the the kids and the quarter midgets go. I will say Iago Martinez is having some fun down there at turn 1 as he tries to exit pit road in this session.
Pit road actually is a very difficult place. We'll talk about that in a couple of moments' time. But what we are going to do, right, let me have a look. Let's try and figure out where it is. Right about now is we are going to run you through the races from 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Well, 2015, we say we're just coming back to a restart here. And restarts are always so important, Randy, at this racetrack, because get it wrong, and not only could you end up stacking yourself up and falling backwards, you can create a huge Constantina effect.
And as we watch through this, and by the way, I don't think Constantini's in this restart, so I don't see how he's going to be affecting things. Hey! But regardless, we're going to see several times these races come off late race restarts, maybe with 3 laps to go, 4 laps to go as we watch through this. And some people who get the restart right, they end up working the way towards the head of the field and oftentimes winning the race. People who get it wrong end up working their way backwards. You see coming off of 4 how close these two are going to be fighting this out. I believe this is going to be Holgate and these guys just really fighting for this. Chad Simpson, of course, it was a Mad Cape Racing team. This is how long it's been. There's so many drivers, and I'm not used to seeing some of the cars in the paint schemes because it's so long since some of these drivers have really competed at this top level, or if not even competed at all.
It's been so long since I've even seen that old overlay, to be honest, Randy. As what you do see in late race restarts here, you often end up with drivers all over the place. 2 wide racing all the way through the pack. You had Nigel Marneef and Cam Stark. At this point, they were a little bit too far back, many people were arguing, but because Simpson was battling it out in that number 10 Mad Cape Racing car, it just allowed the Cam Stark to start getting into the picture as they headed themselves towards the end of the race.
And that's one of the big things that's so difficult to do here at Indy, is that you want to manage the fight as much as you can and be able to maintain as much speed as you can. But of course, if you're leading the race late in the race, you're not going to just hand over that race lead. So it is one of the vulnerabilities here at the Speedway. If you start getting overly defensive, you can see the lap times really drop off, and those cars behind you be able to pick up a huge amount of speed and make up a ton of ground. And you see the way that these guys are just fighting for this. There's going to be a handful of replays like this that these guys just go hand over fist fighting for this race win as Marneef steals that lead late in the race, but he's not going to have it for long.
Yeah, Chad Simpson on Facebook Live saying, oh great, 2015 again. So he remembers the pain from 2015. And you can just see how close your top 4 were actually working at this part of the racetrack. Turn number 2, we're going to talk about turn number 2 quite heavily in this event because it arguably is one of those corners that you kind of forget about and then it comes and bites you in the backside. But one thing I did like about the fact that Cam Stark just had the opportunity in the Apex Racing Academy car. Let's not forget, at this point he wasn't even racing for the full Apex Racing team car. He's racing in the Academy machine. But as you just see, as they work themselves towards the end of this event, Nigel Marneef and Cam Stark set themselves up for a fantastic battle at the end.
Yeah, they did. That race victory was so tight that it even tricked our overlays. As it ended up being, of course, Cam who took that race win. And, you know, like you said, Apex Racing Academy, that was, the effort they once had. And we've seen the sort of success and sort of relevance that Cam Stark now has at that Apex Racing team. They've really dialed back that Academy program in a lot of ways, but he is one of the success stories that came through that. One of the first big things Cam Stark was able to accomplish was actually this Indy 500 win in 2015. So it goes to show that the way this event can really, it may not springboard you to success the same way it does in real life, in the sense that you're not getting millions of dollars and sponsorship opportunities, but it can really set the stage of momentum for yourself moving forward, as we now take a peek at 2016 and Matt Pavelski's win.
Having a look then at 2016, and we can see this is the battle which actually ends up, if I remember correctly, Randy, it was a really close battle. You had Rick Music involved, you had Brandon Traynor involved, and it was, again, close towards the end of this event. This race has a habit of spreading itself out over time, so then just getting closer and closer as you get to the end. Matt Pavelski was having the biggest lead that we ever saw in the history of the iRacing Indy 500.
Yeah, the only time we've seen that race victory exceed a second, and Matt Pavelski doubled it. I believe the final margin of victory was somewhere around 2.25 seconds, and, you know, he's able to work some strategy. I remember this race, there was some, you know, Traynor led late, and he came down pit road late in the race for reasons no one was quite sure about. Maybe didn't quite have the fuel. It was sort of unexpected, and everyone was like, why did he just pit? And we all kind of knew that he had likely lost that race, but it was Pavelski who was able to take advantage of that and put out the biggest margin of victory we'd ever seen.
At the end of it, you had Pavelski winning by about 2.2 seconds over Brandon Traynor. Nigel Marneve comes home in third place in this event. We're going to let, of course, pictures plan out. Holgate, I mean, Holgate's situation is he's been there or thereabout almost every year of this event, Randy. He's just not been able to get himself that second victory.
Yeah, we're going to see he came darn close in 2018 as well, or excuse me, 2017, when we eventually switch over to Christopher Demerit. But yeah, I mean, it's Tim Holgate has, I think, really been the most consistent driver in relatively recent years. You, of course, have Tim Doyle, like we said, the first 3 seasons had an average finish of like 1.3, which it turns out is pretty good. But, you know, Tim Holgate's been one of the most consistent drivers in the last number of years. And last year's winner as well, Josh Chin. Josh has a tendency to climb his way towards the front of these Indy 500 fields, and be very, very relevant. He's not consistently had the luck. He's consistently getting into trouble with traffic in the 2017 race. I know he tangled with Brandon Trost. But and as well the fact that he nearly won a race a couple of years, I think, before these broadcasted races as well. But Josh is another one to really keep an eye on, not only his last year's winner, but is a very relevant person here at the Speedway. Yeah,
worth noting that in this 2016 race, we ended up with 16 drivers finishing on the lead lap. A total of 24 drivers completed the race. We had 4 drivers 1 lap down. We had 1 driver 2 laps down, and 3 drivers a total of 3 laps down, including eventual race winner Joshua Chin. He finished this 2016 race back in the 23rd position, and it was the biggest margin of victory that we ever seen. But it's worth noting, as you say, Brandon Traynor led 129 laps of that race. Holgate led 16, Christopher Demerit 27. Matt Pavelski only led 10 laps, but often, as we often say in motor racing, it's the last laps that matter, Randy.
Yeah, it's always a big talking point. It's not just leading the most laps or even necessarily leading starting the last lap. There's so many drivers that have led coming to lap 1, end of lap 199, starting lap 200, that did not lead at the end of lap 200. And that's the one to really look out for. Of course, in these DW12 days, it was always a little bit easier and a larger talking point, talking about the slipstream. The cars really sucked up a lot more in the draft. You don't see that as much in the Dallara IR18, so I don't think we're going to see as crazy, as deep moves coming as far behind as we've seen in years past. But regardless, it's always something to talk about here at the Speedway, that in late runnings, people are going to find that extra little bit to try to rein in gaps and keep that tradition alive of having the race finish under a second.
Yeah, your top 50 is top 10 then on the 2016 race. Pavelski from Traynor, Marneve, Holgate, Simpson, Demerit, Ellis Jr., Brandon Trost, Marco Brazil, and Jeff Drake. As we head ourselves now to 2017, and after a very close race a very elongated race in terms of the final positions, 2.2 seconds. 2017, we go back to a mighty close finish. This one comes down to just 2/100ths of a second between Christopher Demerit and Tim Holgate.
You have Brandon Trost in that purple and blue car who was tangled in an incident with Josh actually just before this restart happened. And you're going to see that with the way the likes of Holgate and Demerick work with Brandon, or rather not whatsoever. Normally those two maybe be a little bit more respectful and maybe be willing to be a bit more aggressive with the driver they're fighting with for second. But the way that Brandon sort of drove Josh, you're going to see these two really kind of avoid him, and you just see Tim able to set that move up. It's also, of course, the fact that Brandon Trost is typically run very, very high downforce sets, and you see Tim able to just easily drag race him down in towards turn one. Demerick tries to find an open door as well, but this race win was an absolute. I think this has probably been the most entertaining race win to watch, just in the terms of pure number of cars duking it out. Normally you get two, maybe a third car. This, you had 6 cars all within a fair chance to win coming into 2-3 laps to go.
Yeah, you had 11 different leaders and 50 lead changes in this event. Most laps led in this race, by the way, was Christopher Demerick with 94 laps led. Tim Holgate, he got himself a total of 48 laps, scored complete in the lead. Brandon Trost led 21 laps, Austin Espartee 12. And then you also had Jeff Drake leading 13 laps here as well. But you just see, as they head themselves towards the end of the race, just how close it is. And the thing of these DW12 cars as well, Randy, you had to be prepared to give the inside line if you wanted any chance to make the move back into turn number 3.
Yeah, you did, and that was one of the things with these older cars. There was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of, okay, you're up the inside, I need to just let you go. And that could be very disconcerting when you're leading the field going in towards turn 1 on the white flag lap, that you give up that race lead and to be able to fight for it back as you come off of turn 4, come into the checkers. But that's what you had to do in these older cars. And you see Demerick, the likes of Espartee, you have Tim Holgate up there in the mix as well. That race lead just getting swatted back and forth. And also talking about the fact, Will, in this older car, we were always talking about the drag race coming off turn 4 down to the checkered flag to get yourself into the sim racing immortality. Christopher Demerick for this race was the quickest car from turn 4 down to the start finish line all race long, and we're going to see that be relevant in just a couple of moments.
Yeah, indeed. And by the way, you can't tick that off the game we've got going on yet. That won't start until we go on to YouTube. Of course, we've got 10 facts that we are going to say at some point during the broadcast. We almost guarantee you can win yourself a free 1-month membership to Virtual Racing School just by keeping an eye out over the course of the broadcast, marking them off as you come along, and then just letting us know your scorecard at the end of the race. But here we are then, and this is that battle that we talk about. You can see, even as we come to a couple of laps to go, it gets really, really close out there. We're going on board here and out of the onboard shot, and we're just having a look at the two come towards start-finish line. Just look how close it is here as they come to the stripe, and it just looks like Demerick, you're right, just so much faster every time they come out of turn number 4. And a lot of people do set their cars up, Randy, knowing that the end of the race is, of course, out of 4, not out of 2.
Yeah, and that's such a big thing. You see Demerick going so defensive on the inside. He's going to let Holgate work the long way around. And actually, Holgate did a fantastic job from the second line here to get the pass done. It's not oftentimes you see that run along the outside work, but I just brought it up for a moment, and it's just the fact that Demerick's able to just immediately rebound and pull off one of the most amazing finishes and race wins I've ever seen. Demerick's ability to pull that off was absolutely stunning. To be stuck on the tight line out of entering turn 3 and exiting turn 3, and to be able to spool that thing back up through the short chute and off of 4 and slipstream Tim for the win and rob Tim from a second race victory and be able to get himself his first was absolutely stunning.
Absolutely fantastic to see. And again, that so easily could have been Christopher Demerick, could have been Tim Holgate getting himself his second iRacing Indy 500 victory. Again, those of you just joining us, no driver's ever won the broadcasted race twice, but Tim Holgate, along with young Tim Doyle, have arguably been closer than anyone else, and that time the gap on margin was just 2/100ths of a second. So that was 2017. You thought that was exciting. So top 10 is going to come up for you in just one moment's time. Confirmation, Demerick wins. wins. From Holgate, Trost and Espert, Bradley Walters rounds out your top 5. Well, 2017 was exciting, but this is the first time in 2018 we saw the white flag and the green flag come out at the same time. And from that point, Randy, the only word I can describe it was chaos.
Yeah, that's really the best way to describe it. You see the red car out here, Martin Miller, one of the drivers that I felt the worst for. He is really one of the drivers I actually like the most in the IndyCar community. Very, very quiet, just tends to sort of keep to himself to a certain extent. And I thought if there's any driver besides my teammate Josh who ended up winning this race that I wouldn't have minded to see winning this, it would have been Martin Miller. And I felt really bad for him getting shoved out in the closing stages of this race. Because Martin has just been a staple in the IndyCar community and the likes of AeroX and Team Banshee for a long time. You see Josh just immediately hops to that race lead, and now you see a long train of cars led by Kinsella wanting to follow suit.
Yeah, let's listen into the call. To a chin, maybe. They're going to go 3 wide. Look at this. In towards the final couple of corners. Joshua Chin, Andrew Kinsella, Martin Miller's turned around. Joshua Chin will stay on. It's him and Andrew Kinsella. A drag race to a line. It's a new winner. But who's it going to be at the line? It will be just about Joshua Chin winning here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It was a photo finish once again, 13-1000. Well, there you have it. That was then Joshua Chin claiming victory by a very small margin of 13/1000ths of a second, beating out the driver of Andrew Kinsella. I will say, Randy, either one of those drivers would have been worthy winners at the end. And
I preferred Josh.
I know you preferred Josh being a teammate, but any of those drivers, I mean, you had Jeff Drake in 3rd, Kevin Ellis Jr. in 4th, Austin Espert in 5th place. But you're right. I think the biggest heartbreak of that race was the fact that Martin Miller, unfortunately, just had that incident at the very end of the race, and he could well have been in the shot or making that 3 wide at the end.
And of course, we always talk about the race win with that race, but the fight for 3rd was amazing as well. They were 3 abreast, 1,000th of a second between 4th and 5th. So those guys were going crazy as well. But you're right, there were so many names. You know, I a little tongue in cheek reverts to Kinsella there. You know, with the bias with me towards Josh. But you're right, so many of those drivers near the front of the field, the likes of Martin Miller late in the race, Kinsella, Jeff Drake, Austin Espert, Kevin Ellis Jr., and of course Josh as well. I think any of those top 5, top 6 that you saw really being able to fight up near the head of the field late in that race, I think would have been great people to see win this thing and pull it off. But I am happy my teammate managed it.
By the looks of it, Brazil is ready. I'm not quite sure if this is a little bit of overhype, but Jeff Waite on Facebook, the country is now waiting for the race like a soccer World Cup day. I mean, I've seen a Brazilian football match, and they take their soccer, football, very, very seriously, Randy. But for Brazil, I mean, this could be one of the biggest races they've had in sim racing. They've been in the World Cup of iRacing finals so many times and come up short. This could be a chance for them to put on a clinic here today.
And actually, Will, I think what's so great about this is coming right up as we lead in towards that Porsche Esports Brazilian Super Cup. I can't remember the actual technical name of the series,
Carrera.
but of course, the Porsche Carrera Brazil Cup that we have coming up that was just announced earlier this week. You know, we've of course seen the Porsche Esports Super Cup come out and be great on an international level. Them having their own national level series come out is a great thing, and to see all of those drivers being able to potentially take part in this, and I just think for the entire country as well. Brazil tends to be a very patriotic country, and it turns to they very much support their countrymen whenever it comes to a big international level event, be it the Brazilian soccer team taking part in a huge soccer event, be it their drivers in the Indianapolis 500, be it their drivers in Formula 1. There's always an outpouring of support, which I love to see, very similar to the Spanish fans and Italian fans as well in various forms of motorsports. And it's so great to see, and I think it's great to see Brazil come out swinging for this race leading up towards that Porsche Carrera series that we'll be having, and I believe on June 9th is the opening round at Interlagos of all places.
Yeah, don't remind me, because that's going to be a hard race to direct. We've got commentary for that in Spanish, in Portuguese, in German, and in English. It is going to be a RaceSpot TV mega cast. So we talk about this being one of the biggest broadcasts of the year for us. Well, that mega cast is also going to be absolutely huge. So make sure to check it out. It wouldn't be Indy though unless we had a chance to talk to a former Indy 500 champion, and at this point we say hello and welcome to Broken Arrows, Brandon Traynor. Brandon, you nervous?
Yeah, you could say that. You know, we came up so close in 2016 and had that late race caution, and as you guys so generously pointed out, I made the wrong strategy call there, and
you're welcome.
Ultimately lost that race there, but no, I've been absent the past 2 years playing with race cars, and finally have a Saturday off, and the guys over Broken Arrow have put a good set together, so hopefully we can get into the record books here today.
Well, you won the quote-unquote third of 4 races in 2016, hence me calling you an Indy 500 champion. But you lost out, I say, in the broadcasted race so sorely to Matt Pavelski. In fact, we talk about statistics. How do you feel about having the largest gap between P1 and P2 in Indy 500 history?
Yeah, it's interesting.
For the record, Brandon, I believe that's salt that's getting rubbed into the wound at the moment.
Yeah, no, it is. He's just making fun of me now.
I would never do such a thing like that. One thing I would say, though, is you talked about the fact that your team's come up with a good set, of course. Matt Pavelski, in 2016, winning the race. Your team had such a strong year in 2016. 2017, of course, it was a strong year for you again. 2018 wasn't quite as strong for your team, but you got at least 2 cars going to be running this year. Yourself, Brandon Lichtenberg. We know that you often have technical alliances coming into the month of May. How's the prep been?
The prep's been good. We've been a little off in qualifying. Brazilians are really fast this year, which is good. It'll make things a little more interesting come race time. But we hit on something early in testing and race, and we feel we have a really good car in the draft. So hopefully we can make the most out of that.
This race, we always say it's a very long one, Brandon. 200 laps, 800 corners, 500 miles. We always talk about management of the race. Are you looking to try and get out front early and dictate the pace, or are you looking to just try and see how things go?
You know, I've thought about changing my strategy this year, but you know me, I always throw strategy out the window and try to go for broke. But I think starting 10th, I think we're going to play a little safe here and just take our time getting in the front. I've got some teammates around me with our alliance this year, and we're just going to take our time getting in the front, and you'll be there at the end.
Well, we know that you've only got yourself 15 minutes before it is showtime for you. We'll make sure you get all the practice you can. Before we let you go, Brandon, shout out sponsors. Who gets it done for you and that Broken Arrow team?
Just all the Broken Arrow guys, Brendan Lichtenberg, Krista Merritt, Ryan Norton, and our alliance with Christian Steele and Kevin Ellis and all those guys over there. We're really excited about today's race, so it should be a good one.
Thank you very much, Brandon Traynor. By the way, all those guys over there, he's kind of loosely referring, Randy, to the Apex Racing team, which itself is an amalgamation between Apex Racing UK and the Evolution Racing team from 2000, well, basically start of this year, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you have, of course, I think Vortex sort of working with those guys as well, if memory serves. Maybe I'm incorrect about that. So, I mean, you really do have a bit of a huge kind of working relationship. And, of course, that's something we do always see at the Speedway. We tend to see teams that maybe who would generally lean towards I don't want to work with them, or I don't want to work with anyone. We want to do it ourselves. And then about Monday or Tuesday in qualifying, when you see that you're about a 10th off somehow, you start, hey, I want to, what do you guys have? We'll share data. Our race set's pretty good. And it's always the great haggle trying to find quali trim the week of Indy 500 qualifying is always fun to watch.
Yep, so qualifying is in the books. No drivers can go any faster than what they've done now. It's all about what you can do in terms of the race. Having a look at turn number 4. Of course, it's the point back in 2011, Randy, that we ended up with J.R. Hildebrand in the real life race crashing as he was trying to go around the lap traffic of Charlie Kimball. Lap traffic, it's not as hard as these IR18s, but it will become a factor a little bit later on.
Yeah, and it is going to be interesting to watch. I haven't done any laps. I'm not sure what the car is really like in dirty air, but I can tell you right now that if qualifying's anything to go on, people have been struggling. So it's going to be fun to watch regardless. And like you said, dealing with lap traffic always going to be a big talking point for this race, because for 500 miles, I nearly said 500 laps, nearly turned this into the Indianapolis 1250. It's such a big talking point, especially for the long green flag runs, Will. And that's really the other thing, is just getting on and off of pit road is such a big point of this race for these guys, that, you know, for so many people, so much time may have gone into qualifying runs. There might be some cars that are really good off of pit road, but getting onto pit road, they're likely going to give up a lot of time. And that's one of the worst things you can have here at Indy, is to be bad entering that pit road.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting, those of you who watch NASCAR races here, the pit entry is very different here at Indy compared to on NASCAR. Just going to draw the quick line in the sand, shall we say. This is where the cones would normally be for the NASCAR race. You can see there's quite a bit of difference between that and the Indianapolis pit, and that does make all the difference. Back in the day, Randy, they were using the NASCAR style pit entry cones, and that would make pitting out of turn number 4 complicated, I'd say, but you still see a lot of drivers. I remember John Porzuk once threw a race away pitting when he had a good shot of winning because of his entrance on towards pit road getting a speeding penalty.
Yeah, and it may not seem like a lot. It may seem like it's, oh, well, that's relatively, you know, that's only 50, 60, 80 feet. That can't possibly be that big of a deal. But when you're coming off of turn 4 with the thing spooled up at 220 miles an hour, that extra 100 feet is very, very relevant.
It's a difference between basically locking up the wheels and being able to just roll out of the throttle pedal a little bit, out the brake pedal a little bit, so I say, and get down to that pit limit speed. But you talk about the entry to pit road, that exit of pit road. I should have put this in the top 10 things we were going to talk about. The bump, the infamous bump on the exit of pit road. And they talk about how the IndyCar drivers talk about the joys of running the virtual iRacing one, because of the fact that little details like that bump on the exit of pit road are actually there.
You know, it's funny. I think every time I've ever heard a real-world IndyCar driver who has ever driven the Indianapolis on the iRacing sim, that's always what they talk about. They talk about that bump off of pit road, because of course every time you enter the racetrack, you're gonna feel that little thunk. So it's gonna be one of those things that if they see that, and it's just an immediate thing they notice and they recognize, and they're like, okay, so this is how accurate this is. Of course, the other bump that you have out there on the racetrack that you talk about is, of course, the one through turn 2, Will. Yeah. Because that's really, you know, we always talk about which of these corners are the most difficult. Turn 1, you know, always feels the tightest, at least to me, but turn 2, there's a bump at the apex that both for running in the race and even in qualifying, if you don't sort of straddle that bump just right, it can completely kill your run off a 2 and down the back straightaway.
I think that's the most annoying turn 2 bump in all of motor racing after the one at Iowa Speedway. But one thing that's of course worth noting about the bump on the exit of pit road as well is the annoying thing is it's right at the point that you actually shift from first to second gear. So the revs are changing, you hit the bump, and that's how the back end can step out. And again, we talk about preparation for this event. I've seen so many drivers over the years who have missed out on this race because they haven't practiced in their pit stops under green flag conditions, and to the point that I actually had a race named after me, the Will Vincent Pit Stop Challenge, Randy, because of the fact that the thing that I always used to employ to my teammates when I was a team manager back in day, you're going to win and lose the race on pit road. You need to practice getting on and off the pit road, because what happens on the racetrack, well, that's always incidental. But if you lose time on pit road, that will completely change the entire balance of your race.
100%. And it's, you know, we of course do a lot of IndyCar broadcasting here on RaceSpot, bringing you the classic IndyCar series every couple of weeks. And it's always a shock to me that occasionally you'll have people who are very much in the race. They're running up near the front of the field. in the early goings, and then first cycle of pit stops come through, and they're suddenly 10 seconds down the order because they weren't as good on pit road or because they sped. And we even see this in the eNASCAR Peak Canyon Freeze iRacing series as well. We see drivers at the very top level just bork it up entering pit road, and it is 100% the easiest solution to really, I think, sort out. I think it's an easier problem to fix than doing hours and hours in testing. And I think it should be a standard. If you have a big event coming up, be it a league race, be it if you happen to run that eNASCAR Peak Canyon Freeze iRacing series, stick out an hour of your testing time every single week to getting on towards pit road, and you will see your race results improve because of it.
We are 20 minutes away from the green flag here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the 10th annual iRacing Indianapolis 500. We are almost at the end of our pre-race coverage. But Randy, I think what we've got and what I've seen for our Facebook live stream here today is we've got two camps, the Brazil camp and everyone else.
Yeah, it is basically Brazil and everyone else, which, I mean, of course, like we said, that's what it is with this race. 14 cars in the top 33. The Brazilians are gonna be the big talking point just because of how many of them there are, and because they are all running under one banner from one group. And that's actually one thing, Will, we've talked about so many, you know, the different teams coming in. We had Banshee, I think last year was really the dominant team, sort of that group. We've seen Broken Arrow be strong. I don't think we've ever seen any team bring in this sort of numbers before and dominate the qualifying event like this. I mean, 14 cars all lined up near the head of the field, boxing out the top 2 rows, boxing out 7 out of the top 10 spots. I don't think we've ever seen a team dominate like this ever with this sheer number of cars.
No, I completely agree. I want to say thank you very quickly to Isman Balal, TrackCams22.com, as well as to Virtual Racing School, presenting sponsor of our webcast here today. Well, we have got to take ourselves over to YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be live on YouTube in about 10 minutes time for what is the greatest spectacle in all of sim racing. Get yourself a nice cold drink, sit down and relax, because in the next 4 hours we are going to see one driver do something that very few have ever done on iRacing, and that is win the iRacing Indianapolis 500. Good luck not only to the 33 drivers that will be taking part in our race in a few moments' time, but also to everyone participating in their own Indy 500, their own iRacing Indy 500 over the course of this weekend. Thousands of drivers will take part, Randy, and we've got to remember that it doesn't matter if it's top split or bottom split. You win, you deserve the milk.
Yep, you definitely do. I think it was 1,050 cars qualified for this race today. 1,050th was Randy Crosnow, who accomplished his go as slow as possible challenge once again.
That's only because I didn't get my wheel set up.
That is true. And for the record, that's not him trying to get into a low split. He does that every year just to put himself as slow. That was a challenge, actually, that you two did back in the day.
It was.
But good luck to everyone. We'll likely see closer to 12 to 1,300 cars. I think when it's all said and done, number of people won't run qualifying. But good luck to all of you. And hopefully at least once, you get 4 attempts, once you can make it all 500 miles. I've yet to do it myself.
Good luck also to the Ironmen. There are Ironmen every year trying to do all 2,000 miles, or 800 laps, or 3,600 corners. So if anyone's doing that, we want to hear from you as well. But that's all we got time
3,200?
for. 3,200. I can't count, Randy, okay? It includes some qualifying and practice time in that number as well.
Oh,
but
okay.
What I'm going to say is we'll catch you on YouTube in just a few moments' time. We'll see you on the other side. Bye for now.